We're live. Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm interviewing Paul, a member of the Veterans Against Terrorism March. Say hello, Paul.
Hi, how are you doing?
Paul, you're a member of the Veterans Against Terrorism March.
I am, yes.
Do you care to give that a small description of what that is?
Yes, it's a kind of spin-off movement from the Football Lads Alliance. It's another group of concerned families and individuals who would like to unite and make a stand against extremism and some of the incidents that have happened over the last couple of years. But this particular group happens to be generally made of ex-Dom Force members and their families and friends.
Yes, I see. And you're marching against terrorism. Any terrorist attacks in particular?
It's terrorism as a whole, but obviously it doesn't take a genius to work out where most of the terrorist attacks, the source of them, it's generally of an Islamist nature. But that's not to say that any terrorism needs to be opposed on every level.
Now, of course, you're not really saying kind of like all Muslims are terrorists, but all Al-Qaeda terrorists are Muslim.
Yes, unfortunately, and most Muslims aren't terrorists, clearly, but the problem is festering within that community, and it's not being addressed on several levels.
Why do you think it's not being? Why do you think it's not being addressed?
There's several reasons. I think there's a big "not in my backyard" culture goes on in the UK, and unless something physically happens to somebody or their direct family, it has a direct impact on their lives, then they tend to just ignore it with the stiff upper lip sort of scenario. There's also the political sensitivity aspect, which I think is huge. It's not getting addressed because, for whatever reason, the politicians, local authorities, and members of society in general are almost too intimidated or cowed by the political correct model to actually challenge these things. And unfortunately, when it goes unchallenged, bombs go off. Innocents get killed.
A while back, a group of folk were calling for the arrest of some I think it was members of Parliament and the Mayor of London as well. Recently.
Repeat that, sorry.
Sorry. I seen on the Veterans Facebook page that some folk were calling for the arrest of the Mayor of London. I think a few other folk as well.
Right. Okay. I didn't see that, I must admit, but that's possibly a little bit over the top. I don't think there's any grounds for that kind of thing. And yes, I do think that the guy's got some questions to answer, just like a lot of the politicians have. And the blame does lie at their feet in some respects. But to say maybe go out and arrest somebody who hasn't committed an actual crime possibly would A, detract from the actual issue in hand, and B, it would give organizations such as some of these left-wing organizations something to jump on rather than face the elephant in the room, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, we're on about we'll say the Islamic ideology bombing our country, right? But you've got to admit, we've in America have bombed their countries to shit as well. So don't you think there's some I would say justification on their part? They feel justified in what they're doing because we've bombed their country as well.
Yes.
Over a lie, if I remember.
Yes. A couple of things to say about that. Firstly, most of the folk who march on Veterans Against Terrorism, the Football Lads Alliance, against these terrorist attacks, were probably against these pointless wars as well. And yes, one thing you could say about the Islamist terrorists is that at least they're honest and forthright, and they're standing up for what they believe in, and they're fighting back. But unfortunately, that fighting back, when it's targeting innocent women, children, men, families, we've got to fight back against that. And I've got something to put to you. Why is it that, yes, when we all marched against this phony war and the Stop the War coalition were all out marching the streets, which is great because nobody wanted these wars, apart from the elites for whatever agenda they've got. But where are these left-wing Stop the War types when kids are getting blown up? They're deathly silent. It's hypocrisy.
I know. I agree with you. I don't know where they are.
Sorry to interrupt, but so in a nutshell, yes, we shouldn't have gone in and attacked their countries, and we're just as happy to march against these phony wars as well. But it still doesn't justify. Two wrongs don't make a right. It's a classic old statement.
Yeah. A question from Discord from Miss Midnight. Question: do you think it is all possible to vet refugees with any degree of accuracy as to ties to terrorism or criminal connection? And if so, what safeguards would you like to see?
Unfortunately, it appears not, because as we know, most refugees are not legitimate refugees. They're generally young guys, and who often they come without paperwork. They could say they're from anywhere, and even if they do come over here and committed a crime, and deportation is one of the recommendations by the judge or the jury or the magistrate, it 9 times out of 10 doesn't happen. And often, and it's happening all over Europe, where I'll give you 2 examples. The Manchester bomber was the son of a refugee who we welcomed into this country, and that's a refugee who had been vetted and everything else and was legitimate. The son of that family goes and kills 22 people at a concert. What about the ones who are unvetted? And it's not just terrorism. It's the sexual assaults across Sweden and across German cities. It's a massive problem. It's not just terrorism that some of these alien cultures bring. It's the spin-off issues such as sexual assaults, child abuse, grooming gangs, female genital mutilation. I mean, the list goes on.
Is it true that there's no-go zones for people in some areas of England?
No-go zones. That's debatable. I don't think there are no-go zones. I mean, I've been around areas such as Manningham, Bradford, Tower Hamlets, London. Some of these alleged no-go zones, Pollock Shields in Glasgow, and it's fine. It's absolutely fine. It's just one of those wrong place, wrong time scenarios. But I do think if you are a lone female in somewhere like Tower Hamlets, and you might be wearing a skirt, then the chances of you getting accosted in some shape or form is a lot higher than, say, me as a guy. But that's more of a some of the cultural issues you're going to get in these areas. But I wouldn't say yet there's no-go zones. But what I will say is that unless these issues are challenged now and addressed by the political left, as well as the communities involved, then there will become no-go zones within, I'd say, 10 years.
What's the veterans' view, or your own personal view, on the Mayor of London, Tariq, I think his name is?
Sadiq Khan. The Mayor of London.
What's your view? What's your view on him?
Well,
Sadiq Khan.
He's got a difficult job. There's no denying it, and he's getting a lot of things chucked at him, which is a little bit unfair. But my problem with him is that he can't seem to. He's meant to be he's meant to be impartial. He's meant to be the mayor of London, but he brings his politics in it far too much. And it's not for him to say, not to like to say like, oh, we don't want President Trump here. That's not his job. He's making his kind of his left-leaning politics come right to the front.
He did say that like terrorism or terrorist fields are part of living in a big city.
Yes,
didn't he?
He did.
And yet Tokyo, the biggest city in the world, has zero terrorism threat.
Yes, and places like Warsaw, and we know why there's no terrorism, because it doesn't have Muslim populations. And I mean, he might have been taken out of context for that, but the thing with Sadiq Khan, he is always going to have an underlying Islamic agenda, because that's the nature of their holy book and what they're defined by. So I'm very uncomfortable about him being the mayor of London.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, and he's a bit like some of these left-wing politicians. He's shaken hands and shared platforms with nefarious characters who would kill Jews and chuck gays off buildings and stone women. But he's the first to have a meltdown about a tweet that Donald Trump's done. So it's the hypocrisy of the left, which worries me when someone like Sadiq Khan's in charge of such a big project like London. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think there might be, if things keep going the way they're going, that there might be the likes of a civil war?
No. There's definitely going to be civil unrest and civil war. I doubt it. But I do think unless these problems that are festering aren't addressed by the powers that be, and I do think that society will be.
Okay?
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello, are you? Yeah, just listen.
If these problems aren't addressed quickly, then there won't be a civil war, but society will be very fractured and on fault lines, and communities will just live in parallel societies, and there'll be things like Sharia law in places like Bradford, but these communities will never overlap, and there'll be deep mistrust, and yes, there will be lots of civil unrest on an ongoing basis, but civil war's probably taking it too far.
What's would you say the 5 biggest problems are?
What you said, the 5 biggest problems?
What do you think they are, and how do you think they should be addressed?
Well, one of them is the political establishment, because ultimately they don't reflect modern society. You've got like the Tories who only reflect Tories, and the only opposition they've got is Labour, who have become a far right cult of Trotskys, and they're not addressing these issues. I think a major problem is the Muslim community. Then they're too silent and too compliant almost when these things happen.
What would you expect the Muslim community to actually do?
I tell you what, right? You know how in, say, British communities, if there's someone who's like a bit of a Nazi, far right, racist, they get wheedled out straight away, and you know everything from getting like exposed on social media all the way through to losing their jobs just for a political party affiliation. They're not likely to blow kids in it anytime soon, but the hysteria that surrounds it is just ridiculous, whether you agree with them or not. But in the Islamic communities, they're not exposing these dangerous individuals and groups. It's just not happening. And when the bombs go off, they almost play victims, as in, oh, everyone's Islamophobic, we're scared for our safety. Well, actually, you're fine. Just address the problems in house, and we'll stick together. So I think the Muslim community are a problem, and they're certainly in the 5 biggest concerns. And I'd say our political left cause more problems than they solve.
You have to admit, though, there's some folk who target Muslims for being Muslim, as it were.
Yes, and
especially after like a terrorist attack, when kind of feelings and nerves are quite raw from it.
Yes, but having said that, if there wasn't terrorist attacks, it wouldn't happen. I mean, there is a human nature thing where difference. There's always going to be idiots who will who won't embrace someone or something that different. That's just human nature. It's gone on since the start of time. It'll probably go on forever, sadly. And no one should be attacked because of their race, colour, creed. We know that. And yes, to be honest, while there is a spike in, I mean, hate crime, so to speak. Do you know what it is, though? I hate it when our kids are getting blown up at concerts. Yes, I'm not going to go out and abuse Muslims because of it, but everyone has a meltdown about this so-called hate crime, which might involve name calling, but they don't show the same amount of hysteria about the attacks that's just killed people. I just don't understand it.
British Freedom of Truth says in the chat, Islam has no place within civilized Western society. It's a religion of conquest, and the vast majority of its followers cannot function in a free society. Terrorism isn't the problem. Islam is the problem. Even if they stop blowing us up and stabbing us, Islam will still destroy our country.
Sadly, he's right.
You think?
Because, there's precious little about the Islamic faith that is compatible with progressive, tolerant, democratic, and technological scientific societies. It all goes against it, and really, the argument might be, right, okay, well, the more westernized they become, then it's going to calm down over like generations. But sadly, it's not going like that, because we see more and more niqabs, hijabs, the pillar box stuff, and a lot of the traditional Islamic things going on a lot more than we did, say, 20 years ago. So instead of becoming more progressive and tolerant and integrated, it's getting worse. And unfortunately, levels of immigration and birth rates are gonna unfortunately ensure that Islam won't become westernized. It's just going to colonize the West, and we're seeing the start of the problem now. So he's right.
And strangely enough, in Iran, they're actually protesting hijab now. So Iran's becoming more westernized, and we're becoming more Middle Easternized.
Ironically, oddly enough, that appears to be the case, and it's great that these Middle Eastern countries are, are moving forward, and hopefully that means that women are going to be treated a little bit more equally and whatnot. But certainly, it seems to be regressing, going backwards in Western society, because we're not challenging, we're not standing up to it, we're not encouraging tolerance and progression within these communities.
What do you say to the women in the West who say Islam is feminist as fuck? Like, it's full of feminist ideas for equality and everything. What do you say to them?
They say what, sorry?
There's a small, insignificant sector of women who say that Islam is as feminist as fuck. It's
Right.
full of equality for women.
Is that because is that I understand, because they're like, it's almost like their ultra conservatism is their choice and they're empowered by it.
They try to say that Islam promotes equality between the sexes.
Absolutely not. I mean, like you say, that's obviously a small and insignificant number, and that'll remain small and insignificant because it's simply not true.
Yes, and they're saying that the hijab is empowerment, which is funny, as I said, because in the West they're saying the hijab is empowerment, and in the East they're trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, again, that's you have to look at the bigger picture and think, what's going on here? But then I don't want to get into a debate about the New World Order. But there's
no.
But there's this, that is a concern. But ultimately, it does appear that like there is a globalist elite agenda going on, and this is how it's manifesting itself.
Yeah. Do you think and who do you blame for letting the Islam flourish in the West?
Again, the globalist elites, the ones that are above our even above our governments, but from a street level, I would say again it's the political class, and Tony Blair in particular, because his disastrous immigration policy let a lot of things go unchecked, and just generally the political class and our social and political left wing, who seem to have hijacked free speech and unfortunately allowed these problems to flourish by hemorrhaging free speech and challenging these individuals and groups in these communities.
Yeah. A lot of people complain when, say, the UK and America try to talk about border control, but they never mention any other country's border control. Why do you think that is?
Just repeat that question, sorry.
A lot of people complain when the UK and the USA talk about border control, right?
Yeah.
All right? But they never mention any other country's border control. I mean, Australia has the strictest border control I know of, so does Mexico.
Yeah.
Yet they never complain about them. It's always the UK and the USA that has to have open borders.
I guess it's because, again, we're looking at my take on it is the globalist elite thing, and really the first two countries to dilute their intelligence and their opinions and their scientific and sociological knowledge by effectively opening the floodgates and diluting these countries. The West is really seen as the USA and Britain first. I mean, globally, that's who anyone would think of, like, oh, Western civilization. Who do you think of first? Oh, it's Great Britain and America. So there is that, and that brings you on to the borders of, ultimately, like when you look at all the borders that are so porous, when these alleged refugees and asylum seekers and spurious invaders are coming in, they come through various borders to get to ours.
What's your view on Brexit? Is it a good thing or a bad thing, or?
It has it's a bit of both. It's great that we can get back in control of our laws and our borders. I believe that when I see it, but and I despise that unelected super state that's Brussels. Despise them. Again, I don't want to sound like David Icke, but they're part of the New World Order who want to destroy the nation state and build these like super states, and the European Union is that. But economically, it has its bonuses, and also, you know, things like the European Social Fund's been great for things like welfare to work and various programs and projects like throughout the country. But conversely, the money we're saving, if we come out, could be ploughed into that anyway. Nobody ever asked for the EU, really. It was kind of it was done by stealth until it got to the point where, you know, asylum seeker runs over child dies, he gets recommended for deportation, European Court of Human Rights, no, he's got to stay. It kind of got silly. So the opinions divided.
What's your view on Theresa May and her dealing with the leaving of the EU?
Theresa May is quite spineless. She's out of her depth. Yes, she's trying her best, but she's out of her depth amongst those EU leaders, and you can tell in her heart of hearts she wanted to stay. She was a Remainer, and yes, carrying out the
Do you think she's having a little bitch fit because she didn't get her way? Or do you think she actually is trying her best?
I think she's trying her best, but she's out of her depth, and it would be better if Brexit was in somebody else's hands rather than hers, she's ultimately a Remainer. So that's like you, I don't know, you're married to the girl you love, but trying to love somebody else and make it seem genuine, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So would you have, say, Nigel Farage as Prime Minister?
As Prime Minister? Yeah. Well, I wouldn't necessarily have him as Prime Minister, but I would certainly have him on the Brexit panel, coordinating it. I would have a lot more confidence in him. I'm not so sure whether he's Prime Minister material, though.
Who would you say is Prime Minister material? Who would you like to see in office to help start the country?
Ooh, I'll be honest with you.
Or would you prefer that we go to a monarchy instead?
No, I guess that's probably a bit dated. Unfortunately, the political class from both sides and in the centre, they're out of touch and they don't reflect what's going on. So unfortunately, like, I wouldn't have faith in anybody in the political class right now to run the country, because they're just singing from the same song sheet, and they're controlled by the same sort of puppet masters. And as a result, as someone who's realistic and knows a score, I don't bother voting. So I can't answer that question. I mean, I'm politically aware, very much so. But that's why I don't vote.
What is it? So what do you think will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? With the way things are going, and the changes you're hoping to make, what's the best you're hoping for to happen?
The next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a weak Brexit. Our heads are going to remain buried in the sand about terrorism and all the other issues I've mentioned around the spin-off issues, such as the grooming gangs and the stuff like that. And that's going to create tensions between the ordinary folk and the political right and left. So we're going to carry on fighting amongst each other while these problems are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We're going to get more segregated on, I guess, race and cultural lines. When I say race, I don't mean British black people. I mean sort of generally sort of culturally, like sort of religions and whatnot. And there's going to be more social unrest. It's not going to be horrific. There's not going to be World War III or anything, but nothing's going to change apart from the fact these incidents are going to get more regular, and in 10 years' time, there's going to be more social unease and tension. And I think the overcrowding issue for Britain, this isn't like, oh, stop all immigrants coming in. It's nothing to do with that. I mean, I'm married to a black woman. It's just a numbers game. Our infrastructure can't cope with the numbers, and that's going to cause a lot of issues as well. It's not looking too great, I'm afraid.
So would you like say have a massive deportation of people to help ease the numbers? Because I think what we've been doing wrong is simply bringing folk over and sheltering them instead of going to their country and helping them rebuild.
Well, yes, yeah, absolutely right. I mean, a mass deportation isn't a humane solution. It wouldn't look great, but I would definitely say criminals and the 500,000 undocumented or illegal immigrants who shouldn't be here. Certainly, when I say deport them, make sure it's humane and make sure they're not in danger where they go, or even stick to the Geneva regulation where it's like the first safe country. So find out the first safe country that they came through and put them there if they're in danger from the source country. But I think what you suggested there is bolt in the stable door once the horse has disappeared, because it's too little too late now. All we can do is try and manage the situation moving forward, and really limit immigration to those who are genuinely in need, or the ones who genuinely can contribute to society. Because in Tony Blair's reign, I think the population increased by 4 or 5 million, and many of them were illegal immigrants. And so forget the amnesties, forget the softly approach. Enough is enough. We need to have a controlled, effective immigration system that's beneficial for everyone.
I think we should go to the other countries and help the ones that have been hit by disasters, to help them rebuild and encourage folk to go back to them.
Oh God, absolutely. I mean, these countries could be screaming out for these, like, doctors and tradesmen and tradeswomen and stuff like that, because it should be actively encouraged. I mean, these charities and groups and organizations, it should be centrally funded. Let's go out, let's rebuild it, let's upskill them, these places, better places to live, so they don't want to leave their home countries. But that's almost a bit like utopia, because many of them come here for a reason, whether it be economically, and as we're finding, a lot of them are coming because they want to actually carry out attacks and harm us.
What do you think of Trump's shithole comment about these countries?
What Donald Trump said?
Yeah, about these countries being shitholes.
He's a bit of a wally, isn't he?
He's a bit of a wally. Do you think the reaction was justified, or do you think they're just going overboard with the reaction?
Well, the president of the United States really should wind his neck in with his comments, and instead of saying that place is a shithole, whether he did or whether he didn't, he should say, well, this place really needs support and development. It really is, it's crying out for some sort of, some rebuilding, some help, some, that's another way of saying it. Rather, that's a little bit more palatable. Yes, unfortunately, because he's not a left-wing, toe the line type president, there's always going to be mass meltdowns by the left wing, and because it's him simply. But they'll have a meltdown about that, but they won't have a meltdown about terrorist attacks where kids are getting killed. But hey ho. But yeah, Donald Trump was wrong to say that. Yes, these places probably could do with a lick of paint and a lot of support and a bit of TLC and some financial support, whatever. But yeah, he was wrong to say that.
Okay, last stream, because I said we could only stream for the hour. Last last statement from yourself to the people.
Say that again, mate.
As I say, we could only stream for the hour, so we'll have to close soon. Any last words for the people? For anyone really? For the elite, for the terrorists, for the people who are opposed veterans? Any last words for them? Paul, can you hear me?
Yeah, what are you saying?
Right. Any last words for the people who will watch this, even the elite?
Sorry about that. I thought you were addressing others. And
No,
thought that was
your closing statement, basically.
Basically, what we need to do is we need to challenge on every level the hypocrisy and the head in the sand culture that we've got through our political leaders and our left-wing friends. So if you hear or see something, a comment, for example, or there's a meltdown about someone who happens to, I don't know, support the EDL, challenge it and say, well, what about kids getting blown up? Surely that's worth the meltdown. We need to stay strong, keep our heads together. Don't just demonize all Muslims because they happen to be Muslim, because that would just set the movement back. Go to the marches, make your voice heard, and get your friends and get your family along, and just make your point heard, and do it peacefully and firmly, because this battle is not going to go away. It's here to stay, and our survival as a tolerant, progressive, democratic society, and our kids and grandkids' survival could be dependent on us challenging what's going on at the moment.
I would also add to that, as well as don't demonize every Muslim, don't demonize every critic of Islam. Not everyone's criticizing Islam because they hate Muslims. They're criticizing Islam because they have genuine concerns.
Yeah. If someone like Tommy Robinson or Gert Fielders or someone's got the balls to tell it how it is, and they're not doing a Donald Trump saying the place is a shithole, and they're actually saying, well, female genital mutilation is a problem, and there's been no arrests and it's been illegal since 1985, but it's rife. So that is, so don't demonize someone for saying that.
No.
Because yeah, absolutely.
Any final words? And I'll say goodbye.
I would just like to thank you for your time.
No worries.
And onwards.
Thank you for yourself as well.
Yeah, no bother. And onwards and upwards. And stay safe, everybody. And we'll see you on the next march in Newcastle.
What time? Can you show that the next time and place and the area you'll be in?
The next march, I believe, is in February in Newcastle, the Veterans March. I think it's on the 10th.
Sorry, you cut out there. Can you repeat that?
The next Veterans Against Terrorism March is, I believe it's on the 10th of February in Newcastle upon Tyne. And
okay.
And the next Football Lads Alliance, Together We Are Stronger, is Birmingham March. I believe it's the 24th.
Thank you very much.
No
for
problem.
Your time, Paul.
No problem. All the best.
Thank you, everyone who watched. Goodbye.